For this video, I'm going to take you for a full tour of SeaWorld and talk about all the different lands and attractions available here at this Orlando, Florida theme park. The SeaWorld theme park in Orlando, Florida is, in my opinion, probably one of the most overlooked and underrated parks in the Central Florida area. A lot of people don't realize that SeaWorld is the second oldest theme park in Orlando. It opened a decade before Epcot and almost 2 decades before Universal Studios. Every time that I've gone to this park with my friends, they're always shocked at just how nice the park is. They just didn't realize how picturesque it is. I think a lot of them expected it to be kind of schlocky, like a rundown Six Flags park. But, this is the same parent company as Busch Gardens, and Busch Gardens is actually kind of known for its very immersive theming and just very well landscaped parks. So I think SeaWorld has a bad reputation because of that Blackfish movie. The management at SeaWorld has clearly gotten the message, because in the last 10 years, they've moved drastically away from the animal exhibits, and they've put all the money into roller coasters and thrill rides, and they really have pivoted away from the whale shows and all that other stuff, and that will probably be completely gone within another 5-10 years. And that's going to be a big focus of this particular video. I'm going to be talking about all the additions they've made with thrill rides and roller coasters and Infinity Falls and those type of things, because honestly, this is the best park in Orlando when it comes to roller coasters. They've got the most in one park. I realize Universal Studios has some pretty good coasters too, but you really have to park hop between Islands Adventure and Universal to experience all the best roller coasters on Universal property, and it's going to get even more complicated when they open Epic Universe. So SeaWorld definitely has an advantage in that all their roller coasters are located in the same park. So the first roller coaster I'm going to talk about is their Pipeline Surf Coaster. Now, this coaster has just recently opened up here at the park, and it's definitely a unique experience. Truth be told, I'm not a huge fan of stand-up coasters. No other theme park has built one in over a decade, but this is definitely one of the better stand-up coasters. It's themed pretty well. I'll give SeaWorld some props for thinking outside the box with building a coaster that nobody else is doing right now. But how you fit in the restraints will definitely affect whether you like this one or don't like this one, and it definitely is the main reason why I don't like this particular coaster. If you're a certain height, particularly my size apparently, the way the restraints hold you in place, your manhood kind of bangs around in the restraints, and it's painful as hell. So for certain people, this ride is absolute torture. It's definitely an outside-the-box type of ride. It's a novel approach how the restraints kind of hold you down onto the surfboard. You can actually lift your feet when you're catching airtime and everything. So the roller coaster, if the restraints fit you well, this is probably a hell of a lot of fun because there is a lot of airtime on the ride. It's just unfortunate that I happen to be 5'10", and obviously the ride wasn't designed for me. So SeaWorld's second newest ride is Icebreaker, and I really do prefer this ride to Pipeline. It's just a much smoother ride. The restraints are more comfortable. It's more of a family coaster, so it's more mainstream, I guess. It's just a really pleasant ride. Everyone I talk to has positive things to say about Icebreaker, whereas Pipeline Coaster, it's kind of a coin toss. You either love it or hate it, and there's not really anywhere in between. Icebreaker has some really unique elements too. They've got the beyond vertical drop, the spikes, and the directional changes. It's not your off-the-shelf coaster. I don't really know of any other park that has a coaster like Icebreaker. So even though it's kind of a family ride, it's definitely something that you won't experience anywhere else. Another recent addition to SeaWorld is Infinity Falls, which is their spinning rapids ride. I really love this one too. I realize it opened back in 2018, so my definition of recent is probably a little loose, but nonetheless, this is a great ride. It's got a great drop. The lift is kind of unique too. I've never seen a raft ride lift like that, and the scenery around Infinity Falls is just really beautiful. They did a lot of great work with the waterfalls and the misting and all the other stuff that's going on in this ride, and I highly recommend it. It's another one of those family attractions. For the longest time, SeaWorld was kind of focused on these big thrill rides that kind of alienate, I guess, the younger audiences, and Only like the teenagers and young adults would ride them, kind of like Mako and even Kraken to a little bit. And lately they've been adding a lot more of these family rides like Icebreaker and Infinity Falls, and it really has helped balance out the attractions at the park. SeaWorld also has the only hypercoaster in Orlando, which is Mako. It's the tallest and fastest in all of Central Florida, and it hits a top speed of 73 miles an hour. It's definitely my favorite roller coaster at the park. I just prefer hypercoasters, I guess. I'm not a huge fan of inversions anymore, so this is a great one. You know, you still pull quite a few G's going through the turns, and you get some nice airtime pops. One of SeaWorld's older roller coasters is Manta, and I like this one a lot. It's a very smooth ride. It's the only flying coaster in Florida that I'm aware of. And the way they synchronize the water features and the sprayers to the ride passing around, it's just a really well executed ride. I think it's the most picturesque roller coaster they have. The way they have the rocks and the waterfalls out front of the ride, and the way the coaster kind of zooms around the lagoon. Another nice touch of Manta and Journey to Atlantis and a lot of their rides. There are some people who just can't ride roller coasters anymore. They're too old or have health conditions. And what's nice about SeaWorld is they can still have some of the experience, because Manta has an aquarium built into the side of the roller coaster, and there's a separate entrance in the building for it. And Journey to Atlantis is set up like that too. So, you know, for people who are too young to ride or too old to ride, or like I said, have issues, they can still experience part of the attraction. It's a really thoughtful touch, and I've really never seen it at any other theme park. I'll briefly talk about my least favorite coaster in the park, which is probably Kraken. It's just an old ride. It's still pretty large by Orlando standards, but it's a roller coaster that has kind of an identity crisis, doesn't really know what it's trying to be. They experimented with virtual reality a couple years ago. It didn't work out. It's just kind of this placeholder ride where I have a feeling they're going to eventually replace it with something that's better. The last major ride that they have here at SeaWorld Orlando is Journey to Atlantis. This is a really epic dark ride. It's a boat ride, and it's got quite a few outdoor elements where the big drop is located. It's basically their version of Splash Mountain or Frozen, I guess. I absolutely love this ride. I wish SeaWorld would build more dark rides like it. It's just a great experience overall, and it was built back when SeaWorld was trying to build attractions on the same level as Disney World, and now they've kind of pivoted to be more like a Cedar Fair type of park. So the layout of this park kind of reminds me almost a little bit of Epcot, but obviously this park was built before Epcot. It basically surrounds this bay. When you first enter the park entrance, if you walk straight in front of you, you'll end up going to the Seaport Theater and the Sea Lion Otter Stadium. If you're walking through the main entrance, off to your left-hand side will be the SeaWorld Rescue Center and Dolphin Stadium, and the Journey to Atlantis is also back there. Now, if you make a hard right turn as you enter the entrance, you'll actually walk past the Pipeline Coaster as well as the Bayside Stadium and kind of head back to Sesame Street Land. Sesame Street Land is all the way towards the back of the park. In that vicinity is also where Icebreaker and Mako are located, as well as the Shark Encounter and Infinity Falls. So let's talk about the aquariums. After all, this place is called SeaWorld. They do have some of the best aquariums you're ever going to find. So let's cut to the chase. The two best aquariums here at the park are Shark Encounter and Wild Arctic. You're really going to be missing out on the true SeaWorld experience if you don't see both of those aquariums. But it can be a bit of a challenge. A lot of people overlook Wild Arctic because it's awkward to get to now. Back when Wild Arctic was built in the 80s, there used to be a simulator ride that started out the attraction. And the simulator would be like a helicopter tour of the Arctic, and then after that ride finished, you would enter the aquarium. Well, unfortunately, that simulator ride has been closed for years and will probably never reopen. So now to get to Wild Arctic, you actually have to enter a gift shop, walk to the back wall, kind of make a hard left turn in a hallway that you really don't expect. So I'd say 90% of people don't even know Wild Arctic is there, despite it being probably the best animal enclosure at the park. And the penguin enclosure is the same situation. There used to be a dark ride called Empire of the Penguin, and that's been closed for years and standing but not operating. And the same kind of thing where you divert around the dark ride and end up going just to see the penguin exhibit that was at the end of the dark ride. SeaWorld clearly has some issues to resolve. There is a rumor going around that SeaWorld is redeveloping the Wild Arctic experience, where there'll be a roller coaster in the front of the attraction, and then that will lead into the really nice animal enclosure, but that hasn't happened yet here at the Orlando SeaWorld. However, at the San Diego SeaWorld Park, they did do that, and there's a new Arctic Rescue roller coaster in front of the Wild Arctic Pavilion. Shark Encounter is the other really good animal enclosure they have here. It features that long glass tunnel aquarium that you see at a lot of these type of attractions, where you kind of stand on the conveyor and it kind of pulls you through the tunnel. There's a shark reef restaurant towards the end of the attraction, as well as shark pools where you can actually buy food for sharks and feed them. And I guess if you don't want to pay for the food, you could just jump into the shark tanks and let them eat you instead. One of the newest additions to the park is Sesame Street Land. It's a really well-themed and executed land in this park. You can definitely tell that SeaWorld is trying to compete for the younger demographic with Walt Disney World and Legoland, and overall they do a pretty good job. They've got a lot of character meet and greets with Sesame Street characters like Big Bird and Elmo and Oscar the Grouch, and the kids really seem to love it. The children's area seems to be more successful with the Sesame Street IP. I remember when I was a kid, the children's area was themed after Shamu, which I always found kind of ironic, because what would be more kid-friendly than a killer whale? So now I'm going to talk about the food options here at SeaWorld. Honestly, this is one of the better theme parks when it comes to the actual quality of the food. Busch Gardens and SeaWorld are the same parent company, and I think their food options compare favorably to Disney. I've always had lousy experiences when ordering food at Universal Studios. I'm not sure why. It was either usually way overpriced, or the food was cold, or it just wasn't a very good meal. I can only really remember having one bad meal on Disney property, which was at Hollywood Studios. Every meal at Epcot and Magic Kingdom have always gone well for me. If you're planning to eat more than 2 meals at SeaWorld, then I'd definitely recommend you consider buying the all-day dining deal. With that plan, you're allowed to order 1 meal per hour, and that includes a dessert and a beverage. I went to SeaWorld one day with my best friend Jeff, and we literally ate 1 meal per hour and just maxed that thing out, and I think we spent the equivalent of like $150 that day. And I mean, we had chocolate cake and brownies and ice cream and shrimp and pizza and ribs and Chinese food and roasted chicken, and I mean hamburgers, everything we could possibly eat. So just that day alone, I think I ate at 8 or 9 different quick service restaurants here at SeaWorld, and every single meal was perfect. I mean, it was just the consistency and the quality of the food is top notch for a theme park. Another neat aspect of SeaWorld Orlando are the special events. I'm a big fan of the Seven Seas Food Festival here at SeaWorld, and it definitely gives Epcot's Food and Wine Festival a run for its money. Both food festivals are pretty similar in their execution. They set up little food trucks and kiosks where you kind of walk around the park and sample all the different types of food, whether they be like fish and chips from England or the different types of seafood from the Caribbean. It really is an enjoyable way to experience a variety of different foods from a lot of diverse places. SeaWorld also has a really great nighttime Halloween event, and they call it Howl-O-Scream. It's kind of similar to Halloween Horror Nights, but I actually prefer the SeaWorld one, mostly because of crowd sizes. The haunted houses, most of the time, it's only a 15-minute to maybe a half-hour wait. When I went to Halloween Horror Nights last year, almost every haunted house was 90 minutes to 2 hours in line, and I realize Halloween Horror Nights is more immersive, but Howl-O-Scream is good enough for my needs. And the Howl-O-Scream tickets are roughly half the price of an equivalent Halloween Horror Nights ticket, so there's that too. So what's my bottom line for the SeaWorld Orlando theme park? I really like this place. I've always been a big fan of Busch Gardens, and when they merged together with SeaWorld in the early 90s, it definitely led to SeaWorld becoming a better park. I remember as a kid, I was always bored out of my mind at SeaWorld because back in the 1980s, SeaWorld didn't have any rides. But now, after a couple decades of all these amazing rides that have been added to the park, I would have loved to come here as a kid. SeaWorld has kind of carved out a niche as being one of the lower cost options here in Orlando, and they do undercut Disney World and Universal's pricing by probably about 10 to 20%. The annual passes, the daily admission, and even the special events are noticeably less expensive than the larger parks. Like I mentioned earlier, Howl-O-Scream is about half the price of Halloween Horror Nights. The entry-level annual pass they have, known as the Fun Card, will run you about $130 at SeaWorld, and the cheapest annual passes at Universal are about $200, and the least expensive option for an annual pass at Disney is more around $400. Now granted, the Universal and Disney annual passes will get you into multiple parks. Not everybody can afford $200 to $400. And if you're looking for something that's inexpensive, you've got this option, and you could also get an annual pass to Fun Spot, which is a little cheaper than this, but SeaWorld is a much nicer park than Fun Spot. Overall, SeaWorld has become a really nice theme park, and a lot of people who come to Orlando usually overlook it. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by the huge crowd sizes at Disney, or you feel like the prices at Universal are getting out of hand, SeaWorld Orlando is a great theme park alternative. Well, that wraps up all my thoughts on this particular theme park. For the rest of this video, I'm just going to play a little music and take you on a video tour of the SeaWorld Orlando theme park. Bye.